Okay, so you're fascinated by cryptids, right? Who isn't? Bigfoot, Yeti, the Loch Ness Monster. These mysterious creatures, they really capture our imaginations, don't they?
It's true.
But have you ever heard of the Mande Burung?
India's lesser-known answer to Bigfoot, hiding out in those misty subtropical forests of Meghalaya's Garo Hills.
And that's exactly where we're diving deep today. We've got eyewitness accounts, local lore, even some intriguing physical evidence that we're going to try to sift through. So is there something real lurking in those forests? Or are we dealing with a case of mistaken identity, something fueled by myths and rumor?
Yeah, let's unpack it all and see what we find.
Sounds good. All right, so the name Mande Burung literally translates to forest man
Yeah.
in the Garo language, spoken by the indigenous people who live in the region. And you know what? Descriptions of the Mande Burung, they sound pretty familiar. Large, hairy, walks upright, anywhere from 7 to 10 feet tall. We're talking hundreds of kilograms, immense strength.
Yeah.
Starting to sound a bit like Bigfoot's cousin, right?
Yeah, it's true. The descriptions do share some striking similarities.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is the level of detail that sets the Mande Burung apart. For example, villagers often describe its smell as distinctly musky.
Musky.
Yeah.
Huh. Makes you wonder what it's eating out there in those forests that would result in, that particular aroma. Not your average berry diet, I'm guessing.
No, it definitely suggests a diet that goes beyond just, plants and fruits.
Aye.
This detail, while small, it adds an intriguing layer to the Mande Burung's potential behavior and ecological niche.
Okay, so we've got a name that literally means forest man and a musky odor that hints at a pretty hardcore diet. But what about, actual sightings? Have people actually claimed to have seen this thing?
Oh, yeah. There's a surprisingly extensive history of Mande Burung encounters in the Garo Hills.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We're not just talking a couple isolated incidents here.
Mm-hmm.
These stories, they're woven into the fabric of the local culture.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so walk us through it. What are people saying they've seen?
Well, one of the most compelling accounts comes from 2002.
Yeah.
A forestry officer, James Marak, and his entire team. They claimed they saw Mande Burung while they were out on a tiger census in Belbekram National Park.
Wow.
They observed it for an extended period, so it wasn't just a fleeting glimpse.
And we're talking about trained observers here, right?
Oh, yeah.
People who know the local wildlife.
Exactly. And you know what makes this sighting even more interesting? Is that Marak's own father and grandfather, they both claim to have encountered the Mande Burung during their lifetimes.
Wow.
Even his grandson has reportedly seen massive footprints.
No kidding.
This speaks to how deeply ingrained these stories are within the community.
Generations of Mande Burung encounters? That's wild. So it's not just this one forestry officer. Are there other people who've come forward with similar stories?
Absolutely. The Garo Hills are practically bursting with Mande Burung tales.
Really?
Villagers, other forestry workers, they all have stories. We have accounts of the creature effortlessly ripping branches off of trees, overturning heavy rocks like it was nothing.
That kind of strength, it reminds me of some of those Bigfoot accounts, where people talk about them just casually uprooting trees. Do any of these accounts stand out as particularly vivid?
Well, there's one from a woodcutter, Nelson Sangma, who claims he observed a Mande Burung for 3 consecutive days.
Get out!
According to Sangma, it was just casually stripping bark from trees and feasting on the sap.
So this thing has a sweet tooth. Maybe that explains the musk. I'm kidding. But 3 days, that's a pretty long time to have a close encounter with something like that.
It is, and it speaks to the Mande Burung's apparent boldness or perhaps just its lack of fear towards humans.
Which, if it's a large predator, could be both fascinating and terrifying. Now, I know there's a group that's been actively investigating the Mande Burung for a while now.
Are you thinking of the Ashik Tourism Society? They've been on the case since 1997, really trying to separate fact from fiction. They claim to have even captured footage of the Mande Burung's footprints, but those haven't been publicly verified.
Footprints, huh? We'll have to get into that. I'm curious about what kind of mark a creature this big would leave behind, but before we do, I have to ask, what do the authorities in Meghalaya, what do they make of all this?
That's where things get a little, complicated. You see, while the Achik Tourism Society is convinced there's something out there, the Meghalaya authorities are a bit more hesitant.
Skeptical.
I can't say I'm surprised. Officially recognizing a cryptid isn't exactly standard government procedure. What's their explanation for all these sightings? Misidentification. Mostly. They believe people are seeing bears, gorillas, maybe even large langurs, and mistaking them for something more. fantastical. They also point to the influence of local folklore, suggesting that these stories might be embellishments of real animal encounters.
Okay, so they're saying it's more likely that people are seeing something familiar and their imaginations are filling in the blanks, especially with all the stories about the Mande Burung already floating around.
That's the gist of it.
Our.
However, even the most skeptical officials have a hard time explaining away some of the stranger accounts. And, fair warning, this one is something else.
Okay, hit me with it.
One villager reported an encounter with a female Mande Burung that, well, he claims she forced him to breastfeed.
Whoa. Okay, that took a turn. Now I'm all for keeping an open mind, but that one is definitely out there. It makes you wonder about that fine line between myth, reality, and maybe a bit too much time in the forest.
Exactly. And while it's easy to dismiss such accounts as just outright fabrications, it highlights the complexity of these investigations.
It does make you wonder, though, about the power of belief and the way stories evolve over time, especially in a place like the Garo Hills where nature reigns supreme. But speaking of reality, let's look at some of the physical evidence surrounding the Mande Burung, because that's where things might get really interesting. Okay, so we've covered the lore, the sightings, but what about tangible proof? Let's get into the nitty-gritty, the physical evidence that might actually back up the Mande Burung's existence. I know you mentioned footprints earlier, and I have to admit I'm really curious about those. What have we got?
Right, the footprints. Yeah, they've been kind of a cornerstone of the Mande Burung mystery. And we're not talking about your average bear track here. These things are reportedly 13 to 15 inches long.
Whoa, okay, that's enormous. What could possibly leave a footprint that size in those forests?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's what makes these footprints so compelling. I mean, they were found in areas where the Mande Burung was reportedly sighted deep within the Garo Hills. And to make things even more intriguing, they're significantly larger than the prints of any known animal in the region.
So bears, large primate.
Bears, large primates, they're all ruled out just based on size alone.
Okay, so something big is definitely walking around out there. But footprints, even massive ones, can be deceiving. Could it be a hoax? Someone just trying to, stir up the mystery?
It's possible, of course. But then we have the discovery of what some believe to be a Mande Burung nest.
Hold on, a nest? Like a bird's nest, but for a giant hairy hominid?
Well, not exactly a bird's nest, but a structure nonetheless. It was discovered deep in the forest, reportedly constructed of intricately woven bamboo.
Really?
Yeah, and that's where it gets interesting. The level of complexity suggests a level of intelligence and tool use that goes beyond what we typically associate with most animals, even primates.
Wow. A creature crafting a shelter that sophisticated. That does make you think, doesn't it? And if it is the Mande Burung building these structures, what does that tell us about them?
That's what's so fascinating about this discovery. It raises so many questions about the Mande Burung's cognitive abilities, its social structures, even its potential for learning and adaptation. We often think of intelligence as a uniquely human trait, but what if there are other creatures out there, like maybe the Mande Burung, that possess a remarkable intelligence, that we're only just beginning to understand?
It's like that saying, we have barely scratched the surface. But in this case, it might be more like, we haven't even found the right forest floor to scratch. Okay, so we've got these massive footprints, a potential nest site that hints at, surprising intelligence. What other clues have been unearthed?
Well, there are the hair samples.
Right, the hair samples. I almost forgot about those. What did the analysis of those samples reveal? Anything conclusive?
See, that's where the story gets a bit more that complicated. The DNA testing, unfortunately, came back inconclusive.
Oh, no.
Meaning they couldn't definitively match the hair samples to any known species in the existing databases.
So a dead end. Or could it be something else?
Not necessarily a dead end, but definitely a curveball. While a definitive match was not possible, there were some interesting similarities to both human and primate hair.
Okay, now that is really interesting. So we can't rule out a connection to primates, even potentially human lineage. Wow, that adds a whole new layer of complexity to this, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that just because we haven't matched this DNA to a known species doesn't mean it doesn't belong to something. It could be a subspecies, a hybrid, or even an entirely new species that, we haven't identified yet.
Okay, so those inconclusive results might be the most intriguing clue yet. Now, I know there was something about crab remains, too. That sounds a bit random, even for this investigation.
It does, doesn't it? But it's actually one of the more curious pieces of the puzzle. During their investigations, the Âjɛti Tourism Society discovered piles of discarded crab remains deep in the forest. And here's the thing. These crabs weren't just lying around. They had been cracked open and emptied, but there were no signs of animal predation. No teeth marks, no claw marks, nothing like that.
You're saying someone or something was snacking on crabs. But what could crack open a crab that cleanly without leaving a trace? It doesn't sound like something a bear could do, and primates usually use tools for that sort of thing.
Exactly. The way the crabs were cracked open suggests a significant amount of force, a powerful grip. And remember that detail about the Mande Burung's immense strength from those eyewitness accounts. This could potentially be linked.
Wow, a connection between the musky smell, the crab remains, and a creature strong enough to crack them open like popcorn. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So we have massive footprints, a potential nest site, intriguing DNA results, and a crab-cracking mystery. Is there any way to connect these seemingly disparate clues to shed light on what this Mande Burung could actually be?
There might be. And it takes us back in time, millions of years, actually. There's an intriguing possibility that connects the Mande Burung to a long-extinct ape known as Gigantopithecus.
Gigantopithecus. That sounds like something out of Jurassic Park. I'm all ears. Tell me everything. Okay, Gigantopithecus. It sounds massive and, to be honest, a little bit terrifying. Paint me a picture. What exactly were we dealing with millions of years ago?
So imagine an ape, but not just any ape. Gigantopithecus was a giant, potentially the largest ape to ever roam the earth, actually. We're talking a creature that could reach heights up to 10 feet tall.
No kidding.
Sadly, all we have left are fossilized jawbones and teeth, but even those are massive.
Really?
They give us a glimpse into just how colossal this creature must have been.
10 feet tall. Okay, now that is starting to sound a lot like our friend the Mande Burung, but you said it was extinct, right? So how does this giant ape from millions of years ago tie into a creature that people are potentially seeing like right now in the 21st century?
It's a huge jump, I'll admit.
Right.
Officially, Gigantopithecus is considered extinct.
Right.
However, there are some who believe that just maybe a small population managed to survive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in like remote, unexplored regions. Places like, well, the Garo Hills.
So you're saying there's a chance, however slim, that the Mande Burung could be a living descendant of this prehistoric giant ape. That would be unbelievable.
It's incredible, yeah.
Imagine a creature thought to be lost to time, still roaming the forests. But if it's that big, that impactful, wouldn't we have more concrete evidence by now?
Well, that's the question that fuels the fire of this mystery, isn't it? Why, with all the stories, the footprints, even the potential nest, why haven't we captured a clear image of this thing? Well, the Garo Hills are incredibly dense. Their terrain is rugged, often impassable. It's the kind of environment where a large, intelligent creature could easily avoid detection, especially if it doesn't want to be found.
It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is a massive ancient forest, and the needle might be really good at hiding. So where does that leave us? We've got local lore that's practically overflowing with Mande Burung encounters, those gigantic footprints that can't be explained away easily, a potential nest that hints at intelligence, and now this possible link to a prehistoric ape. It's a lot to process. What's your expert opinion? Cryptid, misidentification, or something else entirely?
Well, if I had a definitive answer for you, I'd probably be accepting a Nobel Prize right now.
Right.
That's the thing about cryptozoology, especially where the creature is elusive as the Mande Burung. Concrete proof remains just out of reach. We're left with a puzzle with some intriguing pieces, but no picture to really guide us.
So we're left with the question, what do we do when the evidence, compelling as it might be, doesn't offer a clear answer? Do we dismiss it all as tall tales and overactive imaginations? Or do we acknowledge that there are still mysteries in this world that science might not be able to explain yet?
I think the most important takeaway here is that a lack of definitive proof doesn't automatically equal proof that something doesn't exist.
That's a good point.
The Mande Burung, whether it's a living, Gigantopithecus descendant, a new species altogether, or maybe just a product of cultural myth-making, it forces us to confront the limits of our own knowledge, I think.
It reminds us that we haven't mapped every corner of this planet, haven't sequenced every strand of DNA,